Michael Burry is quite known for putting his reputation on the line by making bold economic predictions. He's done it several times over the years, and the amazing thing, his predictions usually end up being correct. In 2006 and 2007, he was mocked by his investors as he predicted the failure of the US housing market, which became 100% correct in 2008. In February 2021, he predicted a massive surge of inflation in the United States at a time where the latest reported inflation rate was less than 2%. Fast forward to today, correct again. In June 2021, he predicted the greatest speculative bubble of all time in all things before. Stocks and cryptocurrencies crashed throughout 2022. In September of 2022, he predicted a white-collar-led recession, and look at what we have now, massive layoffs occurring across the tech sector. This guy definitely has a knack for getting things right, and recently, he's come out and made another big bold prediction. And now, if this latest forecast would turn out to be correct, that would likely have bigger economic implications than anything he's been talking about over the past few years. So what's Burry's stock market outlook for 2023? Well, let's find out. Now, on his Twitter handle on the 2nd of January, Burry updated us with his thoughts on the economic environment we're all going to see throughout the next few years, and this is what he had to say. Inflation peaked, but it is not the last peak of the cycle. We are likely going to see CPI lower, possibly negative in the second half of 2023, and the US in recession by any definition. Fed will cut and government will stimulate, and we will have another inflation spike. Now, how confidently Burry puts out these predictions? Let's just hope that this once he is wrong, because essentially, what Burry is predicting is that the current downtrend in inflation we're seeing is simply the end of a first wave of inflation, and over the next few years, we'll likely see more waves of inflation because the Federal Reserve will lack the willpower to keep rates high. Yes, potentially cause a recession, but keep rates high, and in doing so, crush inflation once and for all. And the reason that this potential situation immediately sends shivers down the spine of investors is that this would be exactly the same scenario that happened back in the 1970s. But first, let's get into a little bit of context as to what the hell's going on. So over the past few years, we have seen a combination of supply chain issues and also money printing, and together, these have caused inflation to skyrocket to the highest level in 40 years. So, this has forced the Federal Reserve to step in and raise interest rates to put the brakes on the economy, rein in citizens and businesses' ability to access borrowed money, and thus rein in the spending. But of course, doing this also causes the economy to slow down, and it puts everyone under increased financial pressure. It's essentially choosing the lesser of two evils. Do you want to just let inflation run wild and everything becomes increasingly unaffordable? Or do you want to raise interest rates and impose financial hardship on your people for a period of time to choke the demand for goods and services, which forces inflation to settle down? Now, what we saw in 2022 is the Fed raising rates to about 4.5% from effectively zero, and in doing so, inflation is now trending down. But here's the thing, people really do suffer during periods of high interest rates. Now, they're not super high right now, but they are tipped to continue rising throughout 2023. And what high interest rates means for the people is that debts like mortgages and personal loans eat up almost all of the income until they've got no money left over to spend on other things. So, interest rates cannot remain very high for very long, as inevitably there ends up being a lot of political pressure for interest rates to be lowered. After all, lower interest rates make people feel better, and politicians want to make people happy. And also, furthermore, the chair of the Federal Reserve is actually nominated by the president. But if interest rates are lowered prematurely, you can get inflation ramping right back up, and then for all the financial pain you inflicted trying to stop inflation, the problem isn't resolved, and you're right back to square one, and this is exactly what happened in the 1970s. Inflation crept up past 5% in 1970, and the effective federal funds rate was 9%. Then, what do you know? Inflation went back down to 3%, and the Fed lowered interest rates only for inflation to ramp up again to 11% in 1974, to which rates were raised again. this time to 13%. Eventually, inflation cooled back to 6% in 1976, and the Fed relaxed once more, saying, inflation's going away now, and they lowered their interest rates back down to 5%. But too soon, inflation rocketed up to 14% in 1980, and it took Paul Volcker to come in and raise interest rates to 20%, and unfortunately, send the US into a harsh recession. For inflation to finally be conquered, that's what Michael Burry is predicting for the US over the next few years. He does not believe we've learned our lesson and is tipping history to repeat inflation will calm rates, will remain elevated. The US will fall into a recession, people will suffer. The politics will pressure the Fed to lower interest rates and stimulate the economy, thus triggering the next inflation wave. And you might think Burry is a bit of a loose cannon with such a bold prediction like this, but interestingly, he isn't the only famous super investor to express this opinion. One other very notable person also believes that the Fed's willpower will not be strong enough to conquer inflation is Charlie Munger. He even said that it could be worse than what Volcker was dealing with. So very interesting that Charlie Munger and Michael Burry have same opinion in this regard. In their opinion, the political environment that allowed Volcker to get tough and stop inflation in the 1970s might not be there today, unless we could see a period where inflation seesaws because the Fed gets caught in a cycle of trying to lower interest rates only to be forced to raise them again. Although Federal Reserve are committed to ensuring that a situation like that does not occur again in a few press conferences, now Jeremy Powell has acknowledged the inflation cycles of the 1970s and has stated that his present decisions are guided by past traumas. In the most recent FOMC, he stated that Federal Reserve serves as the bedrock of our economy, and they are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship and that the historical record cautions strongly against premature loosening policy. Now, the Federal Reserve is very aware of everything that happened throughout the 1970s and says they are committed to ensuring they don't make the same mistakes again. But Michael Burry's opinion is still very valid because the Fed might be saying all this stuff now, but whether they actually follow through is another question altogether. And that's what both Charlie Munger and Michael Burry are saying. Sure, the Fed wants to get inflation back down to 2 to 3%, that'd be great. But if they have to keep raising and raising interest rates and they cause a nasty recession, it means a lot of Americans lose their jobs and can't afford their mortgages. Now, we will see that this political power will whether properly get inflation under control, or will there be too much political pressure to instead keep the people happy and loosen monetary policy, aka lower rates and print money. As Burry said, we are likely going to see CPI lower, possibly negative in the second half of 2023, and the US in recession by any definition. If the Fed will cut interest rates, the government will stimulate, aka print money, and will have another big inflation spike. So that is Michael Burry's latest prediction, and while it certainly aligns with his previous tweets, that's for sure. At the end of June, after the stock market had crashed 20%, Burry noted that he thinks we're only halfway there. He followed up on September the 7th saying, "No, we have not hit the bottom yet." And he said previously that he expects the S&P 500 to drop below the 2020 convert lows. So there's still no doubt that he is very bearish for the next few years, and it seems his lack of confidence in the Federal Reserve is the prime reason for that. So that's it for today, guys. If you found this video informative, please hit the like button and subscribe if you are new to the channel. Thank you for watching, and see you guys soon.